And with that, I think we are about to get started. Again, if you haven't already, please go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know who you are, where you're coming from. If you're part of an ecosystem, let us know what ecosystem. And if you're not part of an ecosystem, if this is the first time you've joined us, let us know who you are, where you're coming from, and what brought you to us today. We're really, really excited. So good afternoon for those of you on the East Coast. Good morning of those of you on the West Coast. And thank you all for what promises to be an important conversation around empowering communities, fostering collaboration, and ensuring access. Now, before I formally introduce Dr. Moore and James Brown, I want to take a moment just to reflect on the remarkable journey we've all taken together. The STEM Learning Ecosystems Community of Practice is nearly 10 years old now, with more than 110 STEM learning ecosystems serving millions of learners across the globe. We've come a long way, everyone, and as we've crossed the threshold into a new year, we wanted to say thank you for the work that you're doing that has attracted so many to engage in meaningful and hands-on STEM who otherwise wouldn't have had opportunities, and for understanding the importance of diversity in STEM and working so diligently to ensure that we're doing all that we can to ensure that underserved students have opportunities to engage in STEM. Now, before we get to the reason we're all here today, I wanted to share that on January 29th at noon Eastern Time, we're hosting our annual State of the SLE COP. For those of you who are new, that's the STEM Learning Ecosystems Community of Practice webinar. This meeting will be a valuable opportunity for our community to come together and discuss the current state and future direction of our initiative. Join us as we introduce new leadership of the SLE COP, welcome new ecosystems, and report on where the initiative will be heading for the upcoming year. Be sure to register today, and I know Lauren's going to drop that link in the chat. We're ready to officially begin, but before we do that, I just wanted to remind all of you to not only introduce yourselves in the chat, but to keep that chat going, back channel, talk about what you're hearing, and most importantly, to use that Q&A tool you have down at the bottom of your screen to get your questions in as early as possible. Don't forget to also monitor the Q&A tool and hit that thumbs up button next to any question that resonates with you, because we'll use that as an indication of which questions would have the biggest value for this group. Now, to kick us off, please welcome our very good friend, James Brown of the STEM Ed Coalition.
Wow! I feel good.
James.
Thank you, Jeremy. Happy New Year. Always a pleasure to be with the STEM ecosystems community, the only place I know with my own walk-on music. So a pleasure to be here today. And it's a great honor for me to introduce Dr. James L. Moore, who's Assistant Director for STEM Education at the National Science Foundation. His STEM Education Directorate supports research that enhances teaching and learning, and he leads broad efforts to achieve excellence in STEM education at all levels and all settings. And he's very fond of a phrase that I've heard him say many times about the missing millions in STEM, which I think is super interesting because it was mentioned in the press release announcing his joining the National Science Foundation by NSF Director Panchanathan. And I wanted to read that quote to set the stage. James L. Moore brings great leadership skills and vision to our agency and is poised to develop new mechanisms and models for reaching the missing millions in our country. His efforts will inspire the next generation STEM workforce as they unleash their potential in advanced discovery and innovation across the United States. So I want to come back to that quote in a minute, especially the missing millions in inspiring the next generation STEM workforce. So keep those thoughts close. Dr. Moore, who do you see as the missing millions, and how do we inspire them? These questions are central to the work of the STEM Learning Ecosystems community. We're always seeking new partners and new ideas to make this goal a reality. The floor is yours. Welcome.
Well, first of all, thank you for being a host and convening this special group of individuals. What I like to always say, we're merely a vessel, a funding vessel. We make investment in people and ideas, and we know that it's important that we find the right people and the right ideas to move innovation and educational transformation at speed and scale. So I am always delighted. Being a person that has a behavioral science background, I clearly recognize the importance of people. Many of the grand challenges of our time, we're going to have to leverage our human and financial resources in major ways. And so it's so exciting time to be at NSF. It is the moment that I've been waiting for, and it's the moment that we must not abuse, neglect, or even just not put enough time into, because I like to think of this moment as the Sputnik moment of our time. And what I mean by that is we at this crossroads where we have to double down in our investments in domestic populations that have not been adequately supported, cultivated, and even inspired to go into the STEM ecosystem. And where? I don't, it ranges the demographic groups that we're referencing all around the country, whether we're talking about me being a faculty member and administrator at Ohio State and being an alum of Virginia Tech. It's clear to me, I've spent a lot of time in Appalachia, in rural America, as we all know that talent exists everywhere, but opportunities don't always prevail. Whether we're talking about the Appalachia region or whether we're talking about the Delta region of Mississippi and Arkansas, or the Black Belt of Alabama, or urban centers like Youngstown, Ohio, or Detroit, Michigan, or Gary, Indiana, or Chester, PA. I think you all get the gist of it. There are too many individuals along the continuum, along a long continuum of age groups that have not been afforded an educational experience that lend themselves into the STEM ecosystem. So in some places it might be African Americans, in some places it might be white students, in some places it might be individuals with disabilities. But at the core, no matter what, the umbrella is that we have too many Americans that have not been able to realize their full potential. And some of it is let's think about it. When you think about economics, some of it is the luck of the draw, who your parents are, and what zip code you reside in. I couldn't choose my parents. Thank goodness I had the parents I had. I couldn't choose my zip code. Thank goodness that my parents were able to choose the right zip code for me. But there are some places, and let me just give you a gist of the state of affairs. And this is one anecdote. You probably hear my voice. I'm certainly not from Washington, D.C. I'm from the rural South. I'm from South Carolina. I saw that one of the person introduced themselves. They're from South Carolina. And in South Carolina, I was there maybe 6 months, 8 months ago, talking to state legislators and the state superintendent. And it was one of those institutes that the Hunt Institute convenes individuals in states, and they just have discussions around education. They didn't know I was from South Carolina. So I was able to be a fly on the wall and reveal afterwards. But one of the things that I can't get out of my psyche, and it motivates me every day, because I think it's one example, but this one example is all around the country. This one legislator said, James, in my state, we have about 900 kids, one math teacher, and the highest math kids can take is algebra. That broke my heart. It had nothing to do with the genius of those individuals in that school district, and potentially those kids may not have a traditional pathway to the flagship or land-grant universities. And so I think a part of my job as being the assistant director of the Directorate of STEM Education is to help the agency cast a vision and a plan to democratize STEM education across America. It is a grand challenge, but I think we have enough smart people in this agency and across the nation that we can solve some of these challenges, or begin to solve some of these challenges. And so what I'm excited about in our directorate is that we focus on every juncture of education, versus including formal and informal education. And I know we have several individuals that are in the audience who have been recipients of some of our investments, and we thank you. And when you get an investment at NSF, I like to think we knighted you as a public servant. And in order for us to realize our vision and mission, we have to live vicariously through you all to carry out that vision and mission. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. So as a starting point for this conversation, could you maybe talk a little bit about where you would like to see NSF grow in terms of serving, underrepresented communities in the STEM education world, and how, some of the organizations here might be able to help with that?
Good question. Well, first of all, there's a dearth of STEM educators at the K-12 level across America. And you see it more pronounced in rural America than any other context in America. And then you see it trickle down in urban America, as well as many of the territories, the reservations across America. When I look at the National Defense Act, even though I wasn't born, but I know a lot about it because it helped proliferated the number of school counselors in this country, which is what one of my academic areas at Ohio State, is that through the National Defense Act, the parallel today is the CHIPS and Science Act. And within that act, it underscores the importance of rural STEM education. It underscores creating opportunities everywhere. It underscores the emphasis or the importance of community colleges. It's important that we think about ways that we can make greater investments in some of the most vulnerable spaces in America. Those are the places, not that we want, but we need to co-create with teachers, the individuals who work and fully immerse in those communities and work with those students and families. The other thing is we need a community of practice, a frame that individuals can use to support, to empower and inspire teachers that they can continue to be the tipping point for some of these individuals. So when I say there are many things, and people ask me this question all the time, James. They ask me what one investment we should make. I don't think we're at this place, from my perspective, that we can only make one investment. I think we have to continue to make investments at every juncture of education, formal and informal. We know that schools can only do so much, and that makes it very important for after-school programs, community-based organizations, local government, churches, synagogues, mosques, to play a critical role in moving the tide forward. So, for example, the example that I gave around South Carolina, it's not unique to South Carolina, and I don't mean to put South Carolina on the blast, is how do we continue to find ways to proliferate high quality, inspired, and motivated teachers to work in some of our most vulnerable, under-resourced systems in America. So we have a program called Noise that was built for that very thing. But I can tell you, we're not going to be able to proliferate enough teachers overnight. And in turn, what breaks my heart is if we don't come up with a both and, not an either or, we're going to potentially lose a generation of STEM innovators, tech creators that will contribute to the United States maintaining its status in the world as a leader in STEM innovation. So I think we're going to have to find more creative ways that how we might utilize community colleges, because they're in close proximity to every community. They know the community. And when I go to those meetings, they say community colleges because they were designed for the community. They have their ears close to the ground and they know the pulse of the community. And through activities like these are not new, but depending on what state you live in, they may not be funded by the government. And the LEA, the local educational agency, the school district, may have to front the cost when they are already under-resourced. And what I mean by that is through dual enrollment. In Ohio, we call it post-secondary options. In North Carolina, they might call it early college. These programs that give individuals access to opportunities. So just think, if you want to be an engineer and you can't take calculus because your school district doesn't offer calculus. But in most community colleges, you can take a biology, you can take a calculus, you can take algebra 2, you can take the suite of STEM courses that will prepare individuals. So I'm fixed and focused on how do we democratize in these areas, but also it's important because the Directorate for STEM Education is the largest entity in the federal government that funds educational research. The second entity is IES through the U.S. Department of Education. If you blew up our two entities, R&D would not exist across America. Now hear this, James, check this out. We have delegations coming on a weekly basis from all around the world trying to replicate things that we do in this agency. In fact, there are some countries they call theirs Germany of the National Science Foundation, or they literally took our name and embedded it in their countries. We had Finland, a delegation from Finland, and people rant and rave on a continuous basis about how great Finland is and their educational system. And you know, I've been studying it for a long time, but I didn't really have an opportunity to engage anyone from Finland, but I had my opportunity. And certainly when I got my opportunity, when the director passed the mic, is that Finland is doing well. And I asked them, why do you all think you're doing so well? And when you compare other industrial nations, they're on the top of the food chain. And they said, it's because we utilize the research that you all do in the United States. Now, I said, that's interesting that you all are using it, but other people in the United States are not using it. And so the other piece is what people would know, which is another grand challenge that we have to really think about when we talk about the missing millions, is that like many of the industrial nations and certainly underdeveloped nations, there's a disproportionate number of the boys that are not faring well in education at every juncture. What people don't know, after COVID, when things open up, we had over 800,000 young men who did not re-enroll in college. In places like Ohio State, we don't have a big gap between women and men, but many of our public institutions, there's a disproportionate number of women who matriculate in the institutions I learned. So the missing millions, to me, it's hard to just say these are the missing millions. The missing millions are individuals that need an intervention. And there are a number of these groups. It's never enough money. And even though our budget in our director is about 1.3 billion as a result of CHIPS and science, we got some additional funds within that. But a lot of our money is already earmarked, is congressionally mandated money. So in my career, in the places that I work, resourcefulness, stewardship of resources, sort of like just been innate in me. And so why I'm so excited to be in the room with you all is because it's really important for us to think about ways how we leverage our human and financial resources that we do have. And so we can move some of our innovations at speed and scale. And so I hate to be, I've been a little long-winded, but what I want to say one more thing. These are the questions that we wrestle with the missing millions. How do we ensure equitable access? How do we recruit, retain, right? That retention is very important, and prepares students for the variety of STEM opportunities. How do we improve teaching and learning, right? And what are the different modalities that we can use? Like, for example, we make investments in technologies that advance teaching and learning at every juncture of education. But if we're thinking about K-12 and under-resourced schools, it's important that we have some guardrails around some of these things and keep these things in strong consideration when we create these technologies. One, if you're in an under-resourced school district and we're saying we want to reach those places or under-resourced institutions of higher learning, we have to think about costs. It needs to be very minimum cost or no cost because they don't always have the resources. Two, we have to think about broadband. Some of these school districts in Ohio, I don't have to go far, I won't call out names, and I've been in all, probably more under resource schools in Ohio, probably than most, is that some of these places got the internet, but it's like being in an underdeveloped nation. If you travel abroad and you get off the plane and you're trying to do the internet and it's spotty at best. And third, you need to have high quality professional development for teachers. If not, if you don't keep those three things at the forefront, metaphorically, it would almost like we make investments that will stay in the closet. But one more thing, NSF makes investments in IES. We have to make sure that the curricula and the findings from our educational research are accessible to the communities that can benefit the most from it. And so this notion of open access is really important. Now, open access is not about just good for the research community, but these tools that people might potentially could utilize that could advance teaching and learning in some of the in the classrooms. So I'll stop there.
So Jeremy, I know we've got a bunch of questions from the chat. We should probably get into some of those.
Yeah, and actually, before we do that, thank you, James and Dr. Moore. And if it's okay with you, I'm going to hop in with a few questions that ecosystem leaders have been asking us. So prior to our meeting today, we assembled a group of leaders from the STEM Learning Ecosystems Community of Practice who met to discuss how STEM learning ecosystems can leverage funding from NSF grants to provide innovative programming and solutions for the communities they serve. Some participants from these conversations are going to be asking some of these questions. And first up, I know we have a question from Darren Gray, Vice Chair for the LA STEM Ecosystem. Darren?
Thanks, Jeremy. Dr. Moore, we really appreciate you coming and sharing your insights. And based on those insights about NSF grants that you shared with us, where should the STEM learning ecosystems be focusing their attention if wanting to apply for NSF funding? So what's the best fit for the STEM learning ecosystems?
Well, like I said, we focus on every juncture of education and we're always open to ideas. I don't want us to walk away and say that I got to fit in this cookie cutter, because I want to say this before I give you a more in-depth answer. is that NSF, we take unsolicited proposals. Let me say that, unsolicited proposals that may not fit within our existing programs, right? And there are mechanisms in which we do that, and ways in which we get a variety of different programs to make investments in. Normally in the protocol in our process, people put a one-pager together. We don't want 5 pages, 10 pages, with a one-pager, and using the headers, intellectual merit, and then the second header is broader impacts. How the intellectual merit, what questions are you trying to answer? What are you trying to achieve? What knowledge and understand will be ascertained from this project? The second, broader impacts, how will individuals benefit as a result of the work that you're proposing, right? So one place, if you're thinking about K-12, it's a sweet program. I love it. It's called AZEL, Advanced, and I think we'll have some people kind of put stuff in chats for me. Advanced informal STEM learning. We fund museums, we fund documentaries, we fund after-school programs, we fund programs that may deviate from formal education. Because really, when I look at my early research, when I ask people why they went into STEM, is either because they had a great chemistry teacher in Cleveland, because I got a big donor, we had a big donor at Ohio State. It's very affluent, was very successful in his research and created a big company. And he had a chemistry, he grew up blue collar, and he had a chemistry professor who knew the art and science of chemistry. And it was infectious. Now he's this renowned a biotech person. And so the classroom, we can't ever dismiss the power of a teacher. The second thing is what we call these supplemental opportunities, these after-school programs, these summer programs like NSF, pre-college program, young astronauts, Upward Bound STEM. Those programs give people not only move from abstract, but they get to get the hands-on experiences, right? They move from didactic activities to experiential activity. So we invest nearly $100 million, nearly $70 to $100 million in that program. And we think that's a program that should be considered. And many of our program officers, they have experiences in the informal space, as well as many of them worked in K-12 and beyond. The other piece, if you all are interested in the preparation of pre-service teachers, because in Noyce, you have to have a nonprofit collaborator or organization that's connected to grants, is we know in LA, you need teachers. You need teachers. So the Noyce program focuses on pre-service teachers at the undergraduate level as well as the graduate level. And it pays full cost of attendance for the education for students, and they get an enriched experiences. One of the other tracks that is worth talking about is track 3 of the Noyce program. It's the Robert Noyce program. It focuses there. We know across the country, teachers are not compensated at the level that they should be compensated. So track 3 is a minimum requirement. You can supplement the income of a teacher, but you have to do it minimally 10,000. So if a teacher make 50,000, you can supplement 10, but the minimum you have to put in this grant, in your grant, is 10,000. You could propose more if you needed to. The other piece is for those of you, now, I'm a person, maybe it's, I believe in the power of education. I believe it's redemptive. I think it's transformative. I think it changes the hands you shake, the people you meet, and the places you go. So I'm not of the belief that college is not for everyone. I think it might be, it may not be, you might not be ready for it at this moment. But if you progress, it may be ready for you. And I'm not really ready to kill dreams and aspirations that early in a person's life. And so what I would say, we have a darling of a program called Advanced Technological Education, and it focuses on individuals, what we call middle job skills, high tech, the high skill technicians, where it requires individuals to have a little bit more than a high school diploma. So this program funds dual enrollment, post-secondary, but the focus is on individuals developing those skills. Now, my concern when we think about this country and being a leader among industrial nations in the world is because we were a leader in career vocational education, what we call career technical education. And over time, there's been a tension between the two. And we still having this debate that we've had since John Dewey, Du Bois, and Booker T. I mean, we still having this debate about one or the other. And when I had a former doctoral student say we really shouldn't be debating either or, we should say both and, because the person who have both do better in life and they have a stronger trajectory. So we have not made adequate investments in career technical education. And let me tell you this, Darren, you make your own assessment. I used to work in engineering, and in most places around the country, if you wanted to take an AutoCAD class, you had to be in a career technical education program. But these students are in the advanced placement or maybe dual enrollment, and they want to be engineers. And as soon as you matriculate at my alma mater, you're going to take AutoCAD, you're going to take Mathematica. Now, does that make any sense that you can't take the class because it's in career technical education? So we need to adapt to kids in our educational frame rather than forcing always kids adapt to us. We need educational systems that are seamless, that create a variety of pathways for individuals to participate in the STEM enterprise. And we welcome that. There's an initiative called NSF Includes, and it's a broadening participation activity, and it's open for organizations to address systemic barriers in a collaborative, collective impact way.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. So early in your response, you sort of mentioned unsolicited, which is frankly not a word I'm used to hearing in association with NSF. But I was really excited to hear. Could you talk before we go into our next question, could you talk real briefly about that? Is that sort of new, and how should we be thinking about unsolicited funding opportunities?
Well, first of all, you have to tell us why it doesn't fit in an existing program, right? And so you have to do your homework. But you have some senior vets that are in the audience that probably you all could have an ideation session and have a meeting of the mind where they can share what their experiences are. And then what happens is you direct it at a program officer or senior leaders or the director. And what happens is a team of folks, rank and file, come together depending on what people are proposing, the scale of what people are proposing. Our current director is interested in something big and bold. He wants to make a big splash. He wants to move the envelope instant. He don't want to wait tomorrow, and I don't blame him. That's why I'm running as fast as he can, because we're losing folks. And so what I mean by unsolicited, there's no prescribed program for what the idea or ideas that are being proposed. But also let me share also, Jeremy, whether it's explicit or not, we fund planning grants. We recognize that many of your organizations, and there are other organizations that may, they're driven by soft dollars, and someone's time count. Someone has to pay for that time, right? And we know sometimes it takes time to put a quality proposal together. So whether it's explicit or not, you can reach out to a program officer and say, hey, is there opportunity for me to apply for a plan, or my organization to apply for a planning grant, so we can work on putting a strong proposal together? We do that. It's not as exhaustive, as extensive, but it would require many of the same things. Depending on the amount, the review might be different from the traditional panel review. The second thing is we fund meetings that you just say you want to have an ideation. The ecosystem organization want to bring people around specific topics. We fund those kinds of things. And out of it, people typically produce some kind of report or something that it may help inform NSF in its practices or things that we should be thinking about funding. And so those are some of the things. And if it's an if it's individuals who are interested in the research enterprise, certainly there's robust, but we have tools throughout the agency, such as eagers and rapids. Rapids, I'm gonna use this as an example of a rapid. If you want to do a research, you remember when in Texas, they were having all those floods, and schools were shutting down, people lost their homes. That's a national disaster. And just say someone wanted to study, I'm just using this as a hypothetical, they wanted to study how this national disaster impacted educational outcomes in STEM, or how did it affect teachers, or how did it affect families. So a rapid is, you got to get some money fast, or you will lose the moment, because you need to collect the data while we're in this moment. Now, you could do stuff retrospectively, but sometimes the data may not, once people have recovered, you might lose some of the resiliency of the data that you could collect. And a eager is really early, something innovative, early stage investigation that necessarily might not fit within a traditional program. And eagers and rapids could be awarded throughout. The next thing is, if you have an existing NSF grant, there may be ways to bring other colleagues, organizations along through supplements. So Jeremy, at NSF, just say you got $3 million over 5 years. You could get a supplement up to $600,000 of the totality of the award. So because it's 3 million, you can get 300,000, so 600,000. So you could, but it has to be something that doesn't deviate too much from the original intent, but you might have discovered something that you didn't propose, but you need additional funding to explore more in depth. You can get it from, just say you want to bring high school students and teachers into the project and the research enterprise. You can get a supplement for teachers to harness their STEM acumen and that they don't have to work at Hardee's or McDonald's and pay them a really decent salary to harness their craft to a deeper level. These are some of the many things, or even bring undergraduate students in a lab at University of Southern Cal or University of South Carolina. I'm just trying to name in some of the places that I saw, or that, God forbid, that place who won the national championship, that place up north on Monday. So you can see when you become a professor at a certain institution that's below that, that we get indoctrinated not to say certain institutions' names.
Well, I appreciate that answer. And Dr. Moore, we also have so many questions coming in.
Sure. Okay.
You don't have to answer this right now, but I'm actually really hoping that maybe at the end of this, because we're going to run out of time for all of them, we could provide those questions to you and your team, and just kind of get those in written responses that we could put in that follow-up. So simmer on that. But while you do, thank you, Darren, for your question. Lauren's going to go ahead and drop a link into the chat regarding new funding guidelines. And our next question we have is from our brand new SLE COP director, who some of you are meeting for the first time, Jenny Frank. Jenny?
Thank you, Jeremy. And thank you so much, Dr. Moore. I am just absolutely enthralled with this presentation and learning so much. So in my role as the director of the STEM learning ecosystem, community of practice, one of the things that I've noticed to be a very unique feature of this community of practice that is it's comprised of so many different STEM ecosystems, all of which have such a wide range of initiatives and programming and offerings and communities that they work within. But within that, right, in that sphere, in that space of innovation, I've also noticed a lot of times that there is a lot of limitation, especially around their capacity to be able to apply for and even fiscally manage grant opportunities. So considering this aspect of, this community of practice, how does the National Science Foundation specifically foster collaborations and partnerships across these ecosystems or communities of practice like ours?
Great question. And I've been traveling, and I stand ready for any kind of invitations where you've seen or of exemplary practices or organizations. I stand ready to come and see, because I think we as an agency need a framework, but we recognize every framework doesn't necessarily mean it may work in one region, one area in the same way. What are the elements that should encompass that ecosystem of partnerships? What I will say, that increasingly what you will see from NSF, more call out for partnerships and collaborations. In fact, it is the strategy that we're utilizing to move innovation at speed and scale. If you look on our website, you will see that EDU and TIP, that we're not the only directorates, but we're one of the leaders in the agency around collaborating with industry, like Micron, like Intel, like IBM, like Samsung, or even some of the nonprofit organizations like Gates, like Walton Foundation or Smith's Futures. We have MOUs, MOAs that we put together, and sometimes they make investments, and combined with our investments, we're able to make more awards to more investigators. And what I've seen out of that, certainly we have more money than those foundations, even some of the richest foundations. And our money tends to replenish in ways that but foundations tend to find their niche and plug where the gaps in the federal government. One idea for this organization might be is to assemble some of those foundations and then crosswalk what some of those priorities are, because in NSF, we play a role in convening and bringing people tend to take our phone call, at least now they do, because we're a nonpartisan agency. We're independent, and we should keep politics out of everything, but we certainly want to keep politics out of science and technology. And so I would say we have a lot to learn from an organization like this. And I would say institutions of higher learning more specifically have a lot to learn because most faculty members, they are good in their science, but not always with collaborations. Team science is a very important element that organizations who work with multiple organizations, NSF could benefit from tools for organizations to be able to use in collaborations. And not that I need, I used to teach language arts, but we used to call it Cliff Notes, and they call them different things now. And those things will never let you pass a real rigorous teacher's exam, but they certainly build your confidence. That's what I always like to say. But what I would say is really giving some tools for organizations and helping meeting those organizations where they are, right? We don't need every one of the organizations from a institution higher learning standpoint. This is just one example. We don't need everybody to aspire to be Ohio State. We need for them to fully embrace whatever their vision and mission as an organization or as an institution, and to perform optimally for whatever that decoration is. And so what I mean by that is there are opportunities in this ecosystem. We have several congressional mandates that we have allocated funds for historically Black colleges and universities called the HBCU Up program, and focus on undergraduate success, undergraduate education success. We also have a pot of funds that focus on HSIs. And we know that the Hispanic serving institutions, how they have their distinction is different from HBCUs. Some HSIs are very well endowed, and some are not. And some small regional, as well as some small private religious oriented schools, their population changed overnight. And so they have students with high Pell, high needs. So I think there's opportunities for collaborations in that vein as well.
Well, thank you. And we only have about 5 more minutes for one more question, but stay tuned until the very end because we've been back channeling furiously and we've got a little bit of an announcement we'd like to make before we close. And thank you, Jenny, for that question. Don't forget, you'll have more opportunities to meet and learn from Jenny at the upcoming State of the SLE COP webinar, which was in the chat earlier and will go in the chat again. I do see one more question we'd love to throw to you, Dr. Moore, before we close, and that's from Dr. John Fife, Interim Director of the Center for Innovation in STEM Education. Dr. Fife?
Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you so much, Dr. Moore, for being here and for the work that you've been doing to advance STEM education and to reach the missing millions. My question is, how will new funding support innovative solutions to address challenges and inequities in STEM education and also in workforce development?
Oh, great question. Thank you. Well, soon as the CHIPS and Science Act was authorized, we got all these calls, and I'm exaggerating, it seemed like the next week, everybody said, well, how you spent the funds? Well, you authorized, but you didn't appropriate. So I had to learn a lot of things when I got in this role. I'm thinking when it went in law that I got the money, but so I didn't get all the money that that we initially requested, but certainly we have enough money to make a difference. And so with that being said, certainly there's an expectation that we will be good stewards of the resources, and that we would not only that we will refrain from only trying to give existing programs that we already fund some additional dollars. Of course, we did that, but the goal is to outline new initiatives and coalesce around some of these new initiatives where we can have a bigger splash. But one new program that we launched is called Excellent, Experiential Learning for Novel and Emerging Technologies. And basically that program focuses on experiential learning and meeting people where they are. We made the announcement. I think we awarded about 27 projects. And basically, when I say meeting, it could focus on transition from high school to community college. It could be, but industry is front and center. And it's important that we know it's very important that industry to be a partner, not just from an NSF standpoint, but at the local level, because they can help inform some of the curricula, some of the practices and skills and knowledge that we want people to obtain through these experiential learning experiences. And we know in some places in America, in order for people to get, and not only that, we're big on certificates, which is a pivot that we recognize, especially when we talk about advanced manufacturing, biotech, and some of these other emerging industries, that it doesn't require a college education. And how do we leverage the career technical education experience? See, what people don't know, we're talking about 20 million, about 20 young people across the nation and even some of the territories are in career technical education. Depending on where you are in America, some of these places, they don't have the facilities, the teachers to prepare young people for the new frontier of our STEM enterprise. And those are areas that I'm really focused on, which are things that not necessarily NSF has historically made long-standing investments, right? And so, but I think the reason why that legislation, we had bipartisan support, is because many of these legislators' districts are in these rural deserts, if you will, workforce deserts. And I think for those, we're having discussions to focus some of our advisory committee members on some of these topical areas that gives us a chance to zero in. But I can tell you we have some forthcoming emerging darlings that we're working on that hopefully will come out soon. So stay tuned for more. And I'm saying MOORE. My mother, before she died, before hashtag, she would say, "Moors do more." And once you go more, you always want more. So anyway.
I love it. I love it. Well, Dr. Moore, we're so inspired, excited, and ready. So thank you. And we have a quick moving team and a close, effective network. So here's what we've been planning in a little text chain in the background. As next steps, we'll be meeting for an SLE COP ideation session at 1 p.m. on February 15th. We're going to try real hard to get some of Dr. Moore's folks to be able to join us there. But even if they can't, we're going to get together and begin that work. We'll share a summary of today as soon as we're able to, and we'll immediately send out notice of this ideation session. Again, thank you, Dr. Moore. Thank you, James. And thanks to all of you. The STEM learning ecosystem community of practice is an incredible force for good. And once again, all of you are showing it. And we're excited to put our ideas together and bring them forward to NSF. We'll also get all of the questions that didn't get answered today to Dr. Moore and his team. So thank you, Dr. Moore. Thank you to our friend James Brown, as well as to all of you who asked these critical questions. We hope to see you at the State of the SLE COP session and at this newly announced ideation session. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you all next time.